I've been working security for about 6 years now. I've done malls, hospitals, office buildings. You name it, you get used to the quiet. You get used to the idea that being alone is just part of the job. But after what happened at the old textiles factory in Detroit, I don't think I'll ever be comfortable in the quiet again. This place was massive. A sprawling brick complex from the early 1900s that was being converted into luxury industrial lofts, whatever that means. My job was simple. Sit in the guard shack at the front gate, do a perimeter walk every 2 hours, and make sure no copper thieves or urban explorers were breaking in. It was boring, easy money, or so I thought. It was November, dead cold. My breath was fogging up the windows of the shack. Around 2 a.m., I started my second round. The wind was whipping off the river, cutting right through my jacket. I walked to the fence line, checking the locks. Everything was secure. I made my way into the main building to check the boiler room in the basement, which was standard procedure because the pipes were prone to freezing. The factory floor was like a cavern. Moonlight filtered through the high, grimy windows, casting long, skeletal shadows across the concrete. It smelled like wet dust and rust. I clicked on my mag light and headed for the basement stairs. Down there, the air was thick, heavy. It felt like walking underwater. The only sound was the rhythmic drip, drip, drip from a leaking pipe somewhere in the darkness. I reached the boiler room, checked the gauges, everything normal, and turned to leave. That's when I saw the door. It was a heavy steel door at the far end of the corridor, welded shut years ago, or at least it was supposed to be. The weld marks were rusted over, but tonight, the door was slightly ajar. Just a crack. A strip of absolute blackness peered out from behind it. My stomach dropped. I knew for a fact that the door led to the old maintenance tunnels that ran under the entire complex. They had been condemned in the 80s due to structural instability. Nobody had been down there in decades. "Hello? Security?" I called out. My voice echoed, sounding small and weak. Nothing. Just the dripping water. I approached the door, hand on my taser. I pushed it. The hinges screamed, a high-pitched shriek that made my teeth ache. I shone my light into the tunnel. It was a narrow brick tube, maybe 5 feet wide, sloping downward. The floor was covered in a few inches of stagnant black water. I should have turned back. I should have called the cops. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I saw footprints in the mud on the tunnel floor, bare footprints, small ones, like a child's. I stepped in. The water was freezing, soaking through my boots immediately. "Is someone down here?" I yelled again. Then I heard it. A giggle. It wasn't a playful giggle. It was wet, gurgling. It sounded like it was coming from right next to my ear, but the tunnel was empty. I spun around, sweeping the beam of light across the damp brick walls. Nothing. I kept walking, deeper into the tunnel. The air grew colder, smelling of rotten sulfur. The footprints continued, leading further down. After about 50 yards, the tunnel opened up into a small circular junction room. In the center of the room was a chair, just a single wooden school chair facing the wall. And sitting in the chair was a doll, an old porcelain doll with one eye missing and a cracked face. It was facing the corner, like a child in timeout. I froze. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Who would put this here, and recently? The doll wasn't dusty. It looked clean. I took a step toward it, and the flashlight beam flickered. I tapped it. It flickered again, then died. Total darkness. I fumbled for my backup light on my belt, my hands shaking. In the silence, I heard movement, a soft splashing. Splash, splash, splash. It was coming from the tunnel I had just walked through. Something was behind me. I got the backup light on. I spun around. The tunnel was empty. I turned back to the chair. The doll was gone. Panic set in. Real, primal panic. I spun in a circle, the beam cutting through the dark. "Who's there?" I screamed. Splash. I looked down. At my feet, in the black water, the doll was floating face up, but it wasn't a doll anymore. The single glass eye blinked. I didn't think. I ran. I splashed through the water, slipping, banging my shoulders against the brick walls. I could hear something chasing me, not splashing, but scuttling, like a crab on the ceiling. Scritch, scratch, scritch, scratch. Fast. Too fast. I hit the steel door and burst into the boiler room, slamming it shut behind me. I threw my weight against it. Something slammed into the other side with the force of a battering ram. The steel groaned. I fumbled for the chain I carried for the gate and wrapped it through the handles, securing it with a padlock. Another hit. Boom. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Then a voice, not a giggle this time. A deep, raspy whisper, right through the crack in the door. "Marcus." It knew my name. I didn't stop running until I was in my car 3 miles away. I quit the next morning over the phone. I didn't even go back for my last paycheck. But sometimes when I'm lying in bed and the house is quiet, I can hear it. A faint, wet scratching inside my walls. And I wonder if I really escaped or if I just let it home. I work the graveyard shift at a high-end corporate tower in downtown Chicago. It's a 40-story glass monolith. My job is mostly monitoring CCTV cameras from the lobby desk. It's usually dead quiet, watching cleaners vacuum empty offices on tiny black and white screens. The building has a weird quirk. Like many old skyscrapers, the elevators don't have a button for the 13th floor. It goes 12, then 14. But structurally, the floor exists. It's strictly mechanical. HVAC units, elevator motors, server backups. Access is restricted to senior maintenance staff only. Last Tuesday around 3:30 a.m., I was staring at the monitor wall, fighting to keep my eyes open. I have 16 screens in front of me. Screen 4 covers the service elevator. I saw the elevator doors open. That in itself was weird. Nobody was in the building except me and 2 cleaners on the 30th floor. I leaned in. The elevator was empty. The doors stayed open for a long time, maybe 2 minutes. Then they closed. I watched the floor indicator on the screen. It started going up. 1, 2, 3. It stopped. The display on the camera feed was fuzzy, but I could see the digital readout above the elevator doors on the screen. It didn't show a number. It showed a symbol, a dash. I checked the system panel at my desk. The elevator was stationary. It wasn't on 12. It wasn't on 14. It was physically sitting in the space between. The 13th floor. I radioed the cleaners. "Hey guys, are you using the service car?" "Negative, Sarah, we're on 30, haven't moved," came the reply. I felt a prickle of unease. "All right, it stopped on a mechanical floor. I'm going to go check it out. Might be a glitch." I took the master key card and headed to the main elevator bank. I rode up to 14, intending to walk down the stairwell to check the mechanical level door. The stairwell was freezing. Fluorescent lights hummed aggressively. I walked down 1 flight. The door to the 13th floor was unlabeled, just a heavy gray fire door. It had a card reader. I swiped my badge. The light turned green. I pushed the door open. I expected to hear the roar of HVAC fans, the hum of servers. Instead, it was silent. Dead silent. And it wasn't a mechanical room, it was an office. But not a modern office like the rest of the building. It looked like it was from the 1940s. Dark wood paneling, frosted glass partitions, rotary phones sitting on heavy oak desks. The air smelled of stale cigarette smoke and something metallic, like old copper coins. There was no dust. Everything was pristine. "Hello?" I called out. My voice didn't echo. The room seemed to swallow the sound. I walked past the desks. Calendars on the wall were from October 1944. Files were stacked neatly. A half-finished cup of coffee sat on one desk. I touched the ceramic. It was warm. This wasn't possible. The building was built in 1998. I walked toward the center of the room. There was a single office with the door closed. The frosted glass had a name stenciled in gold leaf, Mr. A. Crowley. A light was on inside. I could see a silhouette of a man sitting behind the desk, wearing a fedora. He wasn't moving. I should have left. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I felt pulled toward that door. I reached out and knocked. "Sir? Security?" The silhouette didn't move. But the voice came from inside my head. It wasn't a sound, it was a thought placed there. "You aren't scheduled for an appointment, Sarah." I stumbled back. I'm just checking the floor. We are very busy tonight." Suddenly, the phones on every desk in the open area started ringing. All of them. 50 rotary phones shrilling at once. The sound was deafening, a cacophony of mechanical bells. I covered my ears and backed away. Then I saw the people. They weren't there a second ago. Now every desk was occupied. Men in suits, women in conservative dresses. But they weren't looking at their work. They were all looking at me. Their faces were wrong. They were blurred. Like a thumb had been smeared across wet oil paint where their eyes and mouths should be. Just smooth, fleshy smears. The ringing stopped instantly. The figure in the office stood up. The silhouette loomed large against the frosted glass. The door handle began to turn slowly. I scrambled back to the stairwell door. I grabbed the handle, locked. No. I swiped my badge. Red light, access denied. The office door opened. I didn't look back. I kicked the door, screaming. The man stepped out. I could hear his footsteps on the hardwood, slow, deliberate. Clack, clack, clack. I swiped the card again. Red light. "Sarah," the voice in my head whispered. "Join the staff." I felt a cold hand touch my shoulder. I screamed and threw my entire body weight against the door. The latch gave way, not because of the card, but because the mechanism snapped. I tumbled out onto the concrete landing of the stairwell. I scrambled up the stairs to the 14th floor, lungs burning, and burst into the hallway. I didn't stop until I was in the lobby. I checked the footage when I got back to the desk. Screen 4. The service elevator was in the lobby, doors closed. I rewound the tape to 3:30 a.m. The elevator never moved. It sat in the lobby the whole time. But then I saw something that made me vomit in the trash can on the camera feed of the lobby while I was supposedly upstairs. I saw myself. I was standing at the desk, staring blankly at the monitors. But on the screen, the Sarah at the desk slowly turned her head to look directly into the security camera. She smiled, and her face was blurred, just a smear of flesh. I don't know who or what is working the desk when I look away, but I put in my transfer request today. I can't go back there. Pineview Asylum has been closed since 1992. It's one of those places that local teenagers dare each other to break into. My security company got the contract to watch it during the renovation prep. It was a sweet gig. Sit in a trailer outside, drive around the property once an hour, keep the kids out. The building is shaped like a giant cross. 4 wings, 4 floors. It sits on a hill surrounded by dense woods. It's classic horror movie stuff. Barred windows, peeling paint, gargoyles. The whole 9 yards. It was my 3rd night. A storm had rolled in earlier that evening, knocking out the perimeter floodlights. I was relying entirely on my truck's high beams and my flashlight. Around 1 a.m., I saw a light in the east wing, 3rd floor. It was a flicker, like a candle or a weak flashlight. "Damn kids," I muttered. I grabbed my gear and headed inside. The front doors were chained, so I used the side entrance near the old kitchen. The smell hit me first. Asbestos and mildew. I walked through the cafeteria, tables overturned, metal trays scattered on the floor. I made my way up the main staircase to the 3rd floor. This was the maximum security ward back in the day. The cells here were small, with heavy steel doors and tiny observation windows. I reached the hallway where I'd seen the light. It was pitch black. "Security, come out, you're trespassing," I yelled. Silence. I started checking the rooms, sweeping my light into each cell. Empty, empty, empty. Then I reached room 304. The door was wide open. Inside, sitting in the center of the floor, was a perfect circle of candles, lit candles. They were the source of the flicker. But there was no one there. I stepped into the room to stomp them out. As soon as I crossed the threshold, the heavy steel door slammed shut behind me. Clang. I spun around and grabbed the handle. It wouldn't budge. There was no lock on the inside. It was a cell. I was trapped. "Hey, let me out." I pounded on the metal. "This isn't funny." The candles flickered violently, though there was no draft. Then, one by one, they blew out. I was in total darkness. I clicked my flashlight. It didn't turn on. I smacked it against my palm. Nothing. "Okay, very funny," I said, my voice shaking. "You got me." From the corner of the room, a voice spoke. It was a woman's voice. Soft, maternal. "Time for your medicine, David." I froze. I was backed up against the door. "Who's there?" "You've been a bad boy, David. You didn't take your pills?" Something cold brushed against my face. It felt like wet hair. I flailed my arms, swatting at the air. "Get away from me." I fumbled for my radio to call dispatch. "Base, this is Unit 4. I'm trapped in the East Wing, room 304. Need assistance immediately." Static. Then a voice cut through the radio. It wasn't the dispatcher, it was the same woman. "No one is coming, David. We have all night." I felt hands grab my ankles, strong hands. They yanked my feet out from under me. I hit the concrete floor hard, my head bouncing off the stone. I saw stars. I was being dragged across the floor toward the corner of the room. I kicked and screamed, my boots scraping uselessly against the smooth floor. The grip was iron tight. "Let go! Let go!" I was pulled into the corner, wedged tight against the walls. Then the weight was on top of me. It felt like a full-grown man was sitting on my chest, but I couldn't see anything. I couldn't breathe. "Open wide," the woman's voice whispered directly into my ear. I clamped my mouth shut. I felt cold, bony fingers prying at my jaw. They were incredibly strong. My jaw popped. I screamed, opening my mouth. Something was forced into my mouth. It tasted like dirt and old copper. I gagged, trying to spit it out. Then the weight vanished. The door to the cell clicked and creaked open. I scrambled up, spitting and coughing, and bolted into the hallway. I ran blindly, guiding myself by the walls, tripping over debris until I crashed through the kitchen doors and out into the rain. I got to my truck and locked the doors, hyperventilating. I sped down the driveway, not caring if I hit a tree. When I got to the main road into the streetlights, I looked in the rearview mirror. My neck was covered in bruises, finger marks, deep purple, like they had been there for days. I spit into my hand to get the taste out of my mouth. Sitting in my palm were 3 old, rusted teeth. They weren't mine. I drove straight to the hospital. They told me the bruising on my neck was consistent with strangulation. But that wasn't the worst part. The police did a sweep of the building the next day after I filed a report. They went to room 304. The door was rusted open. It had been fused that way for 20 years. It physically couldn't close. There were no candles, no footprints in the inch-thick dust on the floor. But in the corner where I'd been pinned, they found something scratched into the wall, freshly scratched, into the stone. David took his medicine. Buried under a loose floorboard, they found a small box filled with human teeth. I quit security and work at a bright toll booth now. But sometimes, my hand feels cold and wet, and I smell dirt and metal. Then I know she's still watching, waiting